Enter into a realm of fright, blacker than the darkest night. Your sanity hangs by a thread. Welcome to the House of Dread.
Have you ever experienced a chilling event during your childhood? One that left an indelible mark on your soul. A situation so traumatizing that it haunted your dreams and influenced your actions for years to come. Perhaps it caused you to abandon lifelong goals and visions that you once had for your life, for the fear of failing and having to relive that same pain all over again. As part of the human condition, this is quite common and understandable. On the other hand, however, have you ever grown tired of just being afraid and made the conscious decision to face your fears head on, even if it meant having to experience a little bit of déjà vu? Enter Rebecca. Rebecca was a quiet and reserved woman, now in her early 30s. As a little girl, she had a dream that echoed deeply in her heart. She had a profound desire to study music. In particular, she wanted to learn how to play the piano. This passion was not simply a fleeting interest, but a deep-rooted yearning that only grew stronger with each passing day. Her mother, a strong, nurturing, and supportive figure in her life, recognized the fire that burned within her daughter's soul. Sensing the depth of Rebecca's passion, she had decided to foster this talent by hiring a skilled and experienced piano instructor. This decision marked the beginning of a journey that would shape Rebecca's life in ways she could never have imagined. The instructor, a patient and dedicated musician, began to guide Rebecca through the intricate labyrinth of notes and chords. Every day after school, Rebecca would eagerly sit down at the piano, her fingers poised to dance on the ivory keys. The sound of the piano filling the room, weaving a tapestry of melodies that spoke of her heart's deepest desires. Rebecca loved playing the piano with a passion that bordered on obsession. She would practice for hours on end, sometimes to the point of neglecting her homework. Her mind totally absorbed in the world of music. Each moment spent at the piano, adding layer upon layer to her burgeoning talent. One day, when Rebecca heard the thrilling news that her school was organizing a talent show, her heart leaped with excitement. She couldn't wait to showcase her exceptional piano playing skills on the big stage. Bubbling with enthusiasm, she rushed to share the fantastic news with her mother. Rebecca's mother was overjoyed, her eyes sparkling with pride, as she could clearly see that her daughter's heart was pounding with anticipation. She knew how much this opportunity meant to Rebecca and was determined to support her daughter every step of the way. Together, they began dedicating countless hours to practice and perfecting Rebecca's performance. As the days turned into weeks, Rebecca's excitement grew exponentially. She practiced tirelessly, her fingers dancing gracefully over the piano keys as she brought beautiful melodies to life. Her mother, a constant source of encouragement and guidance, stood by her side, helping her to navigate through the challenges and triumphs of her artistic journey. Rebecca's mother was so proud of her daughter's determination and talent that she decided to invite their entire family and all of their friends to witness the extraordinary event. She sent out invitations far and wide, spreading the word about Rebecca's upcoming performance in the talent show. The anticipation and excitement among their loved ones was palpable, and they eagerly awaited the momentous occasion. On the night of the talent show, Rebecca's heart swelled with an uncontainable excitement. It was as if the sun, moon, and stars had all aligned in her favor. She was confident that she had chosen just the right song for this amazing opportunity, which could not have presented itself at a better time. The anticipation of her performance pulsated through the packed auditorium, where her loving family and an array of devoted friends had gathered to witness their beloved Rebecca in her finest moment. Their supportive gazes and warm smiles filled the room, creating an atmosphere charged with love and encouragement. As she stood backstage, Rebecca could feel the weight of their expectations. But rather than feeling overwhelmed, she drew strength from it, knowing that this was her time to shine. After what felt like an eternity of waiting, the moment finally arrived. Rebecca's heart pounded as the MC called her name. She walked confidently onto the stage, the sea of faces in the auditorium blurring into a single mass as she took her place behind the grand piano. She was ready to showcase the song she and her mother had been painstakingly practicing for weeks leading up to the talent show. As her fingers danced across the ivory keys, the melody swelled, filling the room with its sweet harmony. The audience listened attentively, captivated by the delicate notes that hung in the air. Rebecca felt a surge of pride and accomplishment. She was nailing it. But then, disaster struck. Her hands faltered, and she hit a wrong note. Not just any wrong note, but a glaringly obvious one that shattered the seamless flow of the music. It was a rather cringy moment, and the once enraptured audience exchanged knowing glances, and a ripple of sympathy washed over the room. Rebecca's face flushed with embarrassment, but she was determined not to let one mistake ruin her performance. She took a deep breath and began again, only to find her hands betraying her once more. The same excruciatingly sour note echoed through the auditorium, this time eliciting a few stifled giggles from the audience. Her frustration and embarrassment grew with each subsequent mistake. Every time she attempted to restart, that inevitable sour note returned. Rebecca's special moment was beginning to feel like a cruel joke. The once supportive faces in the crowd now held expressions of sympathy mixed with confusion. Rebecca's heart raced, her palms slick with sweat as she struggled to regain control of her performance. But unfortunately, after what felt like countless attempts, Rebecca was never able to recover from her initial blunder, and the once highly anticipated solo turned into a heartbreaking display of struggle and disappointment. Finally, unable to bear the humiliation any longer, she abruptly stopped playing. The silence that followed was deafening as she looked out into the sea of faces She saw disappointment and confusion, but also empathy and understanding. The looks on her parents' faces, particularly her mother, whose eyes were filled with love and encouragement, urging her to keep going. But Rebecca knew she couldn't continue. Without saying a single word, Rebecca dashed off the stage in tears. A chorus of sympathetic applause filled the auditorium, a stark contrast to the buzz of anticipation from just moments before. After Rebecca's debacle of a performance, her family and friends met with her backstage, trying their best to still be supportive and offer Rebecca words of encouragement. They reminded her of how courageous she was for having the nerve to get up on that stage in the first place. Naturally, Rebecca's parents, particularly her mother, was especially sympathetic and told Rebecca that she was proud of her no matter what, and that one unsuccessful performance didn't define her as a performer or a person. But Rebecca was in no mood to listen. The humiliation was like a suffocating shroud, engulfing her in its relentless grip. She had spent weeks pouring her heart and soul into this performance, rehearsing endlessly, perfecting each note and movement. She couldn't fathom how it had all gone so terribly wrong. She had failed, and she knew the memory of this disastrous performance would haunt her for a long time. With tears welling in her eyes, she vowed to never let such a catastrophic failure ever happen to her again. Fast forward to the present day, and Rebecca is a middle-aged woman who had given up on her dream. She still had a deep love and passion for music, but she decided it was probably best to stay out of the spotlight. She decided she would never play the piano again, not even in private. The shame and embarrassment she felt on that humiliating night had been seared into her mind, and she didn't want to connect herself to any activities that would trigger the intense emotions from such a painful memory. However, that would soon change. One day, Rebecca's mother passed away after a long, arduous battle with breast cancer. Rebecca was devastated. Her rock, her guiding light, and her biggest cheerleader was now gone. The pain was overwhelming, a heavy weight pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. As she stared at a photograph of her mother, memories came flooding back, each one more clear and vivid than the last. She remembered the countless hours her mother had spent by her side, nurturing her passion for music, encouraging her to chase her dreams. Her mother had always been her biggest fan, her unwavering support in a world filled with uncertainty and doubt. Rebecca's thoughts drifted to the last argument they had about her decision to give up on playing the piano after the school talent show. Her mother had been quite disappointed, not just in her decision, but in the fear and self-doubt that had led Rebecca to abandon her dream. It was a subject they had revisited many times over the years, each conversation filled with love, frustration, and a deep longing for understanding and resolution. As the tears fell, Rebecca realized that she had not only let herself down, but that she had also let her mother down. She knew that her mother would want her to continue, to find the strength to overcome her fears and pursue her dreams with unyielding determination. She was worth it, and she deserved to have the ability to express herself, utilize her talents, and live a life filled with passion and purpose. Rebecca closed her eyes, taking a deep breath as a sudden wave of clarity washed over her. A newfound determination stirred within her, shaking off the lingering doubts and fears that had haunted her for so long. The piano, her once cherished passion, called to her like a long-lost friend, urging her to return to the world that she had abandoned. The memory of that fateful night at the school talent show flooded her mind, the echoes of her embarrassing performance still ringing in her ears. But this time, instead of cringing, she felt a surge of defiance. She wouldn't let that one moment define her or conquer her spirit. She deserved better, and she knew it was time to reclaim her love for music and passion for the piano. Tears streamed down her face as she thought about her mother, who had always been her biggest supporter. She could almost hear her mother's gentle voice urging her to press forward, to never again entertain the thought of quitting. The pain of losing her mother was still raw, but it was also the very thing that fueled her resolve. Several months later, one of Rebecca's friends informed her that she knew of a talented piano teacher who might be of great interest to Rebecca. Eager to share this opportunity, her friend provided the teacher's contact information and strongly encouraged Rebecca to reach out. Overwhelmed with joy, Rebecca promptly dialed the number she'd been given, her heart pounding with anticipation. The phone rang a few times before the warm, friendly voice of an elderly woman answered on the other end. Rebecca's nerves dissipated as she heard the kindness in the woman's voice. The elderly woman introduced herself as Miss Bailey and asked how she could be of assistance. Rebecca explained to Miss Bailey that she had received her number from one of her close friends, and Miss Bailey expressed her enthusiasm and gratitude to Rebecca for contacting her. Rebecca explained to Miss Bailey that she was interested in piano lessons. She told her that she had once played as a child, but now she was ready to take it more seriously than ever before. Miss Bailey then informed Rebecca that she had a studio in her home and invited Rebecca to train with her at her private residence. As the details were discussed and the arrangements were made, Rebecca could hardly contain her excitement. This was the moment she had been waiting for, a chance to return to the piano and rekindle the passion that had once filled her heart. On the day of Rebecca's first lesson with Miss Bailey, she pulled up outside of a modest home, seemingly built in the early 1900s. It was surrounded by tall trees that cast long shadows on the well-manicured lawn. The house itself was painted in a warm, welcoming shade of yellow, with white trim and shutters that seemed to smile at Rebecca as she approached the house. As she walked up the concrete path leading to the front door, Rebecca couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation mixed with a touch of trepidation. She knew that this was the first step on a journey that would either lead her to her dreams or trigger the recollections of a nightmare she'd been trying to avoid for so long. Miss Bailey greeted Rebecca at the door with a warm smile and a welcoming embrace. She was a petite, full-figured woman with silver hair neatly pulled back into a bun, and her eyes sparkled with a warmth and enthusiasm that immediately put Rebecca at ease. As they walked through the house, Rebecca couldn't help but notice the countless photographs that adorned the walls, each one showcasing Miss Bailey with her previous students. However, Rebecca did notice that there was something odd about the pictures. Miss Bailey seemed to be the only one smiling in them. The expressions on the faces of her students were either neutral or carried a hint of unease. It's as if the students were trying to put on a brave face, hiding their true feelings as they posed for the photographs. The studio itself was located in a cozy room at the back of the house, filled with natural light that streamed in through a large bay window. The room was dominated by a magnificent grand piano, its polished surface reflecting the warm glow of the sunlight. The walls were lined with shelves filled with sheet music and various trophies and awards that Miss Bailey had accumulated over the years. Miss Bailey, with a warm smile, gently guided Rebecca towards the elegant piano, inviting her to take a seat. The sunlight, streaming through the window, cast a golden glow on the polished wood, creating an atmosphere of comfort and familiarity. This was not just a simple invitation to begin their first lesson, but a heartfelt gesture to initiate a bond between the teacher and her student. As Rebecca nervously sat down, she couldn't help but feel a sense of nostalgia wash over her. She shared with Miss Bailey her childhood memories of playing the piano, careful not to mention the painful memory of her disastrous performance at her school talent show. Miss Bailey, with a motherly understanding, listened intently to every word Rebecca spoke. Her eyes reflected empathy and kindness, creating a safe space for Rebecca to share her fears and insecurities. In response to Rebecca's concerns, Miss Bailey tenderly offered words of encouragement and support. She reassured Rebecca that there was no pressure to perform or progress at any specific pace. Instead, she emphasized that the lessons were tailored to suit Rebecca's individual needs and goals. This gentle reassurance seemed to dissipate some of the anxiety that had been lingering within Rebecca, and Miss Bailey, with a warm smile, then requested that Rebecca call her Miss B. The informality of this request was not lost on Rebecca, who felt a surge of gratitude and relief. As their lessons progressed, Rebecca found herself growing more and more fond of Miss B. Their bond strengthened, transforming their lessons into a comfortable and enjoyable experience. Miss B's patience, understanding, and genuine interest in Rebecca's progress fostered a deep sense of trust between them. Rebecca appreciated the way Miss B encouraged her to explore various musical styles and techniques, never imposing her own preferences or expectations. And in return, Miss B was impressed by Rebecca's determination and willingness to learn. She admired Rebecca's resilience in the way she tackled each challenge, always striving to improve and grow as a musician. However, roughly 6 weeks into their musical journey together, Miss B started to exhibit some rather disturbing and unprofessional behaviors. During their lessons, she would often interrupt Rebecca's playing, not with constructive criticism or guidance, but with unsettling personal questions about her private life or other bizarre irrelevancies. These interruptions made Rebecca feel uncomfortable and off balance, disrupting the flow and focus of their sessions. In addition, Miss B's demeanor began to shift. Her once warm and nurturing presence was now tinged with an undercurrent of intensity and possessiveness. She would often linger long after their scheduled lesson times, engaging Rebecca in lengthy and unsettling conversations that left the young woman feeling drained and confused. Rebecca, who had initially felt so at ease with Miss B, now found herself growing increasingly anxious and uneasy in her presence. On the other hand, however, Rebecca couldn't deny how proficient Miss B was at teaching the piano. She was by far the best instructor Rebecca had ever had, and her knowledge and skill level seemed almost otherworldly at times. That being said, Rebecca decided that she would try her best to ignore Miss B's peculiarities and focus on learning from her exceptional piano instruction. But that wouldn't last for long. One day, during a particularly challenging piece, Rebecca made a few mistakes. Miss B's demeanor changed instantly. She went from being a supportive and patient teacher to a harsh critic.
"Oh dear,"
she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm.
"It seems we have a ways to go, don't we, Rebecca?"
Rebecca's face flushed with embarrassment as Miss B continued to belittle her.
"You're not as talented as I thought,"
she taunted, her eyes gleaming with malice.
"Perhaps you should stick to simpler tunes."
Rebecca's heart pounded in her chest as she struggled to maintain her composure. She knew that everyone made mistakes when learning, and it wasn't fair for Miss B to insult her for that. Rebecca tried to remind herself that Miss B's behavior was unprofessional and not a reflection of her own self-worth. However, there was no denying that the words cut deep, and Rebecca couldn't help but feel a sense of distress washing over her. She had trusted Miss B and had believed in her, and now Rebecca was left feeling vulnerable and exposed. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Finally, Rebecca made one mistake too many. Miss B exploded. In a fit of rage, she started berating Rebecca in a manner that was not only humiliating, but also terrifying. Miss B's face contorted with fury as bulging veins throbbed in her neck and temples. Her eyes were wide like saucers, glaring at Rebecca and filled with a toxic mix of anger and disdain. The once gentle and nurturing teacher had transformed into a monstrous figure, her voice a deafening roar that echoed through the room.
"You are nothing but a waste of my time, Rebecca!"
she screamed, spit flying from her lips.
"I took you under my wing, believed in your potential, and this is how you repay me? With mediocrity and incompetence?"
Rebecca sat frozen at the piano, her hands trembling as they hovered over the keys. She had never seen anyone so enraged, let alone someone whom she had once trusted and respected. Her heart pounded in her chest, the fear so intense that she could barely breathe. Miss B's rant continued, each word a vicious strike against Rebecca's already shattered confidence. She accused her of laziness, of not appreciating the gift of music, and squandering her talent. The relentless barrage of insults left Rebecca feeling utterly crushed and defeated. Tears streamed down her face, but she was too terrified to speak or move. She had never felt so vulnerable and powerless, trapped in the grip of Miss B's uncontrollable rage. Suddenly, Miss B's tirade came to an abrupt conclusion. It's as if she was suddenly struck by the realization that her behavior was totally uncalled for. Like an old war veteran coming back to themselves after a flashback, Miss B gathered herself and attempted to apologize to Rebecca, who was still trembling, her heart pounding in her chest. Miss B, realizing her behavior was way out of line, composed herself and approached Rebecca with a remorseful expression. She gently picked up Rebecca's sheet music from the piano stand, her hands shaking slightly. With a green marker, she meticulously marked certain sections of the music, her eyes scanning the notes as if searching for something.
Rebecca,
she said softly, her voice a stark contrast to the harsh tones she had used moments earlier.
I'm sorry for my behavior. I let my frustration get the better of me, and I shouldn't have taken it out on you.
She held out the marked sheet music to Rebecca, her hand trembling slightly.
Your trouble spots are marked in green,
she explained, trying to revert back to the role of being a sweet and supportive piano instructor.
Please, pay close attention to these areas. They will help you to not make the same mistakes again.
Rebecca, still in shock from the terrifying ordeal, hesitantly took the sheet music from Miss B. She looked at the green markings, her mind processing the information. Despite the fear and humiliation she had just experienced, she began to wonder and hope if maybe Miss B was truly sorry, and perhaps they could move past this awkward incident. When Rebecca returned home that night, she found herself in a state of severe emotional turmoil. The harsh words and uncontrollable rage that Miss B had unleashed upon her brought back painful memories of that embarrassing performance at her school talent show. The flush of toxic emotions that she felt on that fateful night were eerily similar to the emotions of intense shame that she experienced when Miss B yelled at her. With tears once again streaming down her face, Rebecca couldn't help but flash back to that night when she sat on stage, her heart pounding with anticipation and nerves. She remembered how, although she had practiced relentlessly for that performance, her failure to rise to the occasion when it counted the most had left her feeling utterly humiliated and vulnerable, much like the crushing sensation of embarrassment that she now felt in the wake of the intense scolding that she received from Miss B. As Rebecca continued ruminating over that painful experience, she could hear the laughter from the audience, along with their whispers of disappointment. She could also see the sly grins and smirks on the faces of her classmates as they reveled in her misfortune. But then she saw something else. The faces of her parents, particularly her mother, their eyes filled with love and encouragement, urging their daughter to keep going. Suddenly, Rebecca found herself crying for a different reason, her shame and embarrassment turning into determination and resilience. She suddenly remembered why she had reached out to Miss B in the first place, reminding herself that she was not going to let that one embarrassing moment define her and rob her of her passion for music and the opportunity to learn and grow into a skilled pianist. Rebecca rationalized that although Miss B had momentarily gone off the rails, she did apologize for it, and that hopefully it wouldn't happen again. As they continued their lessons, Miss B made a conscious effort to be more patient and understanding. She guided Rebecca through the marked sections of the sheet music, offering constructive criticism and encouragement. Rebecca, though still cautious, found herself gradually beginning to relax and re-engage in the sessions. One day, Rebecca found herself struggling with yet another piece of rather complicated sheet music. Every attempt she made resulted in a tangled mess of notes and rhythms. Rebecca began peering out the corner of her eye, and she could clearly see the growing look of irritation on Miss B's face, who was standing right beside her. Rebecca was a ball of nerves as she tried her absolute best, but kept getting stuck in the same spot. Finally, Miss B couldn't contain her aggravation any longer. She snatched the sheet music off the piano stand and began scanning it, her eyes darting back and forth. With a groan, she grabbed her green marker from the nearby table and began marking Rebecca's trouble spot. The green slashes standing out against the white paper like scars on a pristine landscape. Then she gently placed the sheet music back on the piano stand, as if handling a fragile object.
"Start again,"
she instructed, her voice tight with barely concealed irritation. Rebecca hesitated, her fingers hovering over the keys and her heart pounding in her chest. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. She began to play, her fingers moving tentatively over the keys. But despite her best efforts, Rebecca sounded horrible, her notes tangling together in a chaotic mess. As she came to the marked section of the sheet music, she felt her confidence falter. Her fingers stumbled, hitting the wrong keys yet again, creating a cacophony of melodic chaos. Miss B's eyes widened in anger, her lips pressed into a thin line. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Once again, Miss B lost control of herself. In a fit of rage, she slammed her hand down on the piano, causing Rebecca to jump in her seat.
Why can't you get it right?
Miss B exploded, her voice echoing through the room.
It's marked in green! It's marked in green!
She repeated angrily, her fingers stabbing at the offending section on the sheet music. Rebecca flinched at each repetition of the phrase, feeling her confidence shatter into a million pieces. Tears welling up in her eyes once again, threatening to spill over at any moment. She knew she was trying her best, but it never seemed like it was ever enough for Miss B. Miss B continued her vicious rant, scolding and berating Rebecca, making her feel as if she was 2 feet tall. Then, something most peculiar and terrifying began to happen. As Miss B continued her verbal assault on Rebecca, her face red with anger, her voice suddenly began changing into something otherworldly.
I've spent hours marking these sections for you, making it as clear as possible, and yet You keep making the same mistake over and over again! What the fuck is wrong with you?
As Miss B's words became more heated, her voice began to distort, growing deeper and more guttural. It was as if she was transforming right before Rebecca's eyes. Her face contorted, her eyes bulging and turning into a terrifying shade of red. The once elegant and refined music teacher was now a grotesque, monstrous creature.
You are driving me insane with your incompetence!
Miss B roared, her voice now a mixture of human anger and a beastly growl. She began to pound her fists on the piano, causing the keys to clatter and bounce. The music stand toppled over, sheet music flying everywhere. Rebecca cowered in her seat, tears running down her face like a river. She had never seen anyone, let alone her beloved teacher, behave in such a terrifying manner. The room was filled with the sounds of the monstrous yelling and screaming from Miss B, combined with her relentless pounding on the grand piano.
You're a worthless, talentless waste of my time!
The creature that was once Miss B bellowed, her voice echoing through the room, the windows rattling in their frames, and the air feeling increasingly thick with rage and malice. In a desperate attempt to escape, Rebecca tried to push herself away from the piano, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. She was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or speak. The only thing she could do was watch as Miss B's transformation continued. The once beautiful and delicate hands of Miss B now looked twisted and grotesque, with long, sharp claws replacing her elegant fingers. Her arms elongated, reaching for Rebecca like the branches of a twisted tree. Her eyes, now fully red, seemed to glow with an inner rage. As the monstrous Miss B continued her terrifying transformation, Rebecca's legs found new life as she pushed away from the piano, stumbling out of the studio and into the hallway, her legs shaking uncontrollably. She could hear the monstrous Miss B's enraged screams echoing throughout the entire house, growing louder and more terrifying by the second.
Rebecca! Rebecca! Rebecca!
Rebecca! Rebecca snapped back to reality, realizing that she was no longer in the music studio. Instead, she was sitting in the office of a prison psychiatrist. The voice that had been calling her name belonged to a middle-aged man in a white coat, a mental health doctor, not her former music teacher, Miss B. Rebecca's heart was racing as she took in her surroundings. The stark clinical office was a far cry from the warm, inviting music studio that she had just been visualizing. Suddenly, she was not a student, but a prisoner, incarcerated for first-degree murder for the killing of Miss Brenda Bailey, the very woman she had affectionately known as Miss B. Tears welled up in Rebecca's eyes as the memories came flooding back. The mental and emotional torment, combined with the relentless verbal abuse at the hands of her former music teacher, had culminated in a growing resentment that had finally boiled over into a tragic act of violence. Now, she was serving a life sentence with no possibility of parole. Her dreams of a musical career shattered forever. The psychiatrist continued inquiring if Rebecca could hear him, slowly bringing her back to the present moment. "You seem to have zoned out for a moment there. Are you all right?" he asked. Rebecca took a deep, shaky breath, trying to compose herself, not wanting to reveal the turmoil raging within. The doctor looked at her skeptically, but decided not to push the issue any further. "All right then," he said, consulting the notes in front of him. "Let's continue next week." As the prison security guards entered the office and began escorting Rebecca back to her cell, she couldn't help but wonder how her life might have turned out if she had worked to resolve the trauma from her childhood before deciding to re-enter the world of music. Although Miss B's behavior was disrespectful and totally out of line, Rebecca could have simply found another instructor or pursued a different musical path altogether. The monstrosity that she envisioned Miss B turning into was merely a projection of her own deepest fears and insecurities, a grotesque manifestation of her past trauma, brought to life by her unresolved past seeping into her present reality. When Rebecca's tolerance for Miss B's abuse had finally reached its limit, she snapped, causing her to commit a grave act that would cost her for the rest of her life. Oftentimes, the monsters we face are actually the ones within ourselves, shaped by past traumatic experiences and unresolved emotions. Make sure you deal with your demons before they deal with you, because just like Rebecca, you may find out that the price of unaddressed pain is a heavy one, leading to devastating consequences that can forever alter the course of your life. If you enjoyed this presentation, please consider showing your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Until the next tale of terror, this is Victor Bloodborne. Stay dreadful.